All means all is shorthand for the desired excellence and equity outcomes we expect of a high-functioning education system. We're trying to educate all of our students and prepare each and every one of them for success. We've been in an intense time of education reform in the United States really since the mid-1980s, since Nation at Risk days. We've had 20-plus years of experimentation with various forms of reform, various strategies for getting ourselves to all means all in each of our 50 states who've declared this as a goal. And yet, now that the results are in, we have to sadly conclude that the quest for all means all thus far has failed. We still have, for example, an iron law correlation between socioeconomic status and educational achievement and attainment. So, we have now an opportunity to learn from our failure, to rechart our course toward our pathway towards all means all, and that's what my talk is about today. That's what my work here at HGSE is all about. So let's take it away. Number one, I've got 8 big ideas that I want to share with you in the 7 minutes remaining to me. We have a felicitous coincidence between what we ought to do, what civil rights advocates, what educators, what religious leaders have always urged us to do, and what is now in our economic interest as a society to do, and that is to educate all of our children to a high standard, to educate all of our students for success. And by success, I mean, by the way, as I talk about this, a broad definition: success in employment, success in citizenship, success in family life, success as a lifelong learner. If we want prosperity for individuals in our society, if we want our society as a whole to prosper, we need to attain these goals, and we've set them as policy goals in each of our jurisdictions. What we didn't do is we paid too little attention to what strategies would actually be required to deliver on the promise of all means all. And we made an unquestioned underlying assumption that our existing school system ought to be able to accomplish that goal. Well, that was the assumption we made. It turns out it didn't work, and the question is, what did we learn? Big idea number 2, schooling alone is insufficient. School, as we know it, as currently conceptualized in our country, is an insufficient, too weak an intervention to overcome, for example, on average, the disadvantages of poverty. We've got mountains of evidence that tie socioeconomic status to educational achievement and attainment. We want a society in which demographics are not destiny, but we have to say, if we look at the big data and we look at subgroup performance, not true for any individual, but on the whole, demographics are destiny in the way things currently stand. Even in our top performing states, and I'm proud to have worked in this state for a long time, and we're generally acknowledged as the leading state in student achievement, but we have performance results like these, which I don't have time to analyze with you, but you can see 35% gaps that have persisted over time, notwithstanding terrific efforts at education reform. So stats like these make me realize that our work, rather than being finished, has only begun. Big idea number 3, the current system is outmoded. We've got a great system for the early 20th century to produce a bell curve distribution of student achievement over a fairly low center. But we're in the early 21st century, and we need a very different system that produces all means all. We have a batch processing mass production model of education that, again, served us very well if we wanted to achieve a society in which we were sending a lot of people into low-skill, low-knowledge jobs. But for high-skill, high-knowledge jobs in a post-industrial information age, we needed a very different system. There are fundamental design problems with this system, and I don't have time to go into all of them, but basically we've got too little time. We have children spending only 20% of their waking hours in kindergarten through grade 12 in schools, 80% outside. And more importantly, we have a one-size-fits-all model, where we're giving the same treatment to every student who comes in at best and hope that that gets them all to the same place. To take a hospital analogy on this, if we open a hospital, we wouldn't say to everyone who came in the front door, we're going to give you the same treatment and same length of stay, irrespective of your ailment, but we're doing that in education, and it's a problem. So our goal has got to be, and we've got other big challenges on top of this, again, too numerous to mention, subgroups we aren't serving, growing poverty, growing inequality. We need a new design. That's the conclusion. We need integrated systems of education and child development that deliver on the goal of preparing each and every one of our students for success. That's a big job. And in order to do that job, we're going to have to fundamentally redesign the way in which we deliver education in this country. And I don't have the answer to exactly what that looks like, but I know some of the design principles we're going to have to address if we want to get the job done. Number one, we're going to need to differentiate. We're going to need to have a system that meets every child where he or she is and gives them what they need to be successful along each stage of their education and eventually delivers them into the world of higher education and ultimately career, ready for success as I described it earlier. So that's one feature. We can't have the same system. We can't have a system that treats all kids as though they come in with the same assets and deficits, with the same advantages and disadvantages. It's going to take a different approach that takes into account where they are. I used to have, when I was Secretary of Education in the Commonwealth, children coming into kindergarten with 1/3 the vocabulary of the children they were sitting next to, and yet we didn't have a different approach for dealing with those children. We've got to differentiate. Big idea number two is we've got to mitigate in a conscious, intentional way those issues in children's lives outside of school that get in the way of their attending school or being attentive when they get to school. We need braided systems of health and social services and mental health services that are integrated in with schools. We can't ask schools to do all the work of mitigating these problems, but we need systems that provide that support. Finally, big idea number 7 is that we need to increase access to out-of-school learning, particularly for our most disadvantaged students. Advantaged students, affluent families, as we well know, are doing more than ever before in the 80% of children's lives outside of school to enrich their children's education. Disadvantaged families can do less and less. And it turns out the advantages and disadvantages accrued in out-of-school time, whether it's summer, preschool, after school, have every bit as much to do with achievement gaps that show up in school as anything we do inside school to optimize schooling. So we need to address these challenges if we have any hope of getting to all means all. So put all together, this is the rationale for an initiative we've just started here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education called the Education Redesign Lab. The point of our work is to lead a national conversation, a national design process designed to bring together these different elements of reform that I've been talking about, coupled with all the other good school reforms that we're working on, and build models of systems that actually do in the 21st century what we've promised to do but failed to deliver on for a long time, and that is all means all. There's no more important work in our time than doing this work. We need the imagination. We need the evidence and research that comes from places like this and our colleagues around the university to develop a visionary blueprint for what 21st century education ought to look like. And I look forward to working with my colleagues, the students and faculty members here at the school, as well as you, our partners in the audience, our partners in the field, to making this a reality and to finally delivering on the promise of excellence and equity for all of our students. Thank you very much.